Hi, writers. Welcome to Kidlit Summer Camp. My name is Sarah Gentry. I'm an Author Accelerator certified book coach. I work with writers across genres and age categories, but I've always had a soft spot for working with middle grade and YA writers. And one of my specialties is helping writers develop strong structure because story loves structure. And we can't have a strong structure if we don't first have a foundation upon which to build it. So today I'm going to share with you a simple framework that is also highly effective in developing a strong story premise. So let's get to it. We're going to be looking at three key components to create a compelling story. The first is a core or a core message or what's at the core of the story. We'll talk more about that in a minute. We also have a concept. You may have heard the phrase high concept. That's going to be the thing that draws in our reader. And then we have a character that is hopefully memorable and engaging for our reader. So let's talk about each of these three components in some greater detail. Starting with the core. Some ways that you could develop your core are to think about what's really at the heart of your story. It could be a feeling or a slogan maybe, or just something that is something that you have to say about the world. And another way to ask this might be, what do you want your reader to take away after reading your story? How do you want them to feel after they have finished reading the story? These are all different ways of approaching this core message. The core is usually something that's important to you personally. You might have a strong reason for wanting to write this story. And so look for things around that as you are trying to figure out your core. You're also going to have a concept. This is the thing that hooks the reader, the thing that pulls them in. Sometimes it might be a clever setup. You might have heard the idea if you can phrase the story premise as a what if scenario. That's a great way to jump into concept. But these are the things that make the reader perk up and pay attention. It's causing intrigue, if you will. And intrigue is what makes the reader want to engage with the story in the first place. Then, of course, we have our character. And this is where we answer, whose story is this? Now, some of you might be writing a multi-POV story. That's a different layer of complexity, but it all fits into this character bucket. For the main character, we want to think about what do they want? But not only what do they want, how do they need to grow in their quest here to get what they want? What do they need to overcome internally on a mental, emotional level in order to get what they want? And we also need to make sure that there's something at stake for them personally. Otherwise, we will feel disconnected from the story because the character will be disconnected from the action. So I want to highlight a few examples of some stories that do this well. I want to emphasize that every story that's a good story is going to have a strong core concept and character, and they're all going to be nicely in alignment. Having said that, some of the stories are going to really sparkle in one of these key elements. So think of these examples that I'm going to give you as books in which one of these key elements really stands out as being extra special, if you will. So for instance, if I'm thinking about stories with a strong core, I might think of The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas, all about speaking up and taking a stand against injustice. Or you might, for a middle grade example, think of Red, White, and Whole by Rajni LaRocca, beautiful novel in verse about what it means to embrace our full identity, to feel free to be who we are, embracing both our family and our heritage while also realizing that we are maybe not entirely like our family, but we want to be part of everything that makes us who we are, what makes us whole. And then for a picture book, you might think of Watercress by Andrea Wang and Jason Chin. This is a gorgeous picture book that won the Caldecott several years ago. But you might say that the core for this book is not being ashamed of who we are or where we came from. It might be about a core might be about being thankful for what we have and what brought us here. So you'll notice as I say some of these examples, there might actually be different ways that a reader might interpret the core, and that's okay. What's important is that you, the author, will have an idea for one strong core. Once it's in the hands of a reader, we can't really say what we want them to take away from it. But if we have a strong core in mind for ourselves while we are writing it, that will be what makes sure that the story will remain true and cohesive. So let's look now at some stories with a strong concept. These are the high concept books that Hollywood will often talk about. And you'll notice these stories, some of them were in fact turned into movies. Of course, we have The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, YA series, very high concept, the idea of these games in which teenagers are going to have to battle each other to the death. That is a very high concept kind of story setup. There's The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, and of course, all the Percy Jackson series and the spin-offs of those books, going off the idea of what if there are humans who are descendants from Greek gods? What does this look like? And then for a picture book, The Day the Crayons Quit by Drew Daywalt and Oliver Jeffers is a great example. We talked about anthropomorphized characters sometimes appearing in Kidlit, and here's an example where we're looking at the crayons within a box as being individual characters and what do they have to say about their experience of being one of the crayons in the box. And then there are some novels that I wanted to highlight with a strong main character. So for instance, for YA, you might look at The Field Guide to the North American Teenager by Ben Philippe. Such a voicey book with a really interesting and snarky main character, a boy who's had to move from Canada to Texas and is a hockey player and is trying to figure all that out in a place that he does not understand at all. And then for middle grade, we have the popular series, The Diary of a Wimpy Kid. A lot of kids resonate with this book because Jeff Kinney's done such a good job of portraying what it's like to feel like you're always on the outside, that you're never quite good enough, that things are never quite going your way. And this is a very middle grade sentiment to have. And then we have Night Owl, which is a picture book by Christopher Denise. And this one I wanted to highlight because what's interesting with it being a picture book is part of the character is definitely in its illustration quality as well. The Night Owl is a very strong character in its creation, both as a visual. They've turned, plush animals out of the Night Owl, for instance. It's just a beautifully, beautifully made book, but then also his character of kind of being this underdog, if you will, the knight that we wouldn't expect to see. So I would like to encourage you to try this yourself. And the way that I suggest you do this, I have this theory that writers will come to story through one of these three key elements. That either the first idea for your story came to you because you had this strong message that you wanted to share or something that you wanted to say about the world. And if that's you, then maybe start with your core. If you had this very high concept, maybe a what if kind of premise, then I would suggest that you start with developing your concept. And some of you might have come to it with an idea for a character, a very specific kind of character in your mind, and you want to spend some time developing that character. So start with whichever element first drew you to the story idea to begin with. Once you've really nailed that one down, then I would encourage you to pick a second thing. And the second element needs to reflect the first one. They need to work together. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but you want these two things to work together. And then once you've developed the second one, now it's time to add the third one, and you're going to make sure that all of these key elements complement each other. So here's how you're going to fit them all together. Your core should reflect your character's arc. How the character changes over the course of the story should reflect the core of what you are trying to say, of what you want the reader to take away from your book. How the character changes on an emotional and internal level should reflect your core. The concept should somehow highlight the core. So, it's a strong what if concept, but it wouldn't make any sense to have this great scenario that you would have for something high concept and then have a core that's completely out of left field. The core and the concept should also work nicely together, and the concept should be something that can highlight how the core is being expressed. And then the character has to fit within the concept. So it doesn't make sense to have this high concept and then stick a character in there that doesn't make any sense to be in there. So for instance, I just presented all these examples. If we're looking at the picture book world, it wouldn't make sense for me to insert this great character of the night owl and insert him into The Day the Crayons Quit. This does not make any sense. And I know that might seem like a ridiculous example because I'm taking, these two published books that are very well known. However, when writers are creating stories, they do often try to cram these things all together that don't actually work together. So you have to be ruthless in making sure that these three elements are going to play nicely together, that they're going to fit together, and that they're going to strengthen each other so that you can have this strong premise on which to build your story. So while you're doing this, you want to make sure that all the connections work together. And I would encourage you to take care with this step because if they aren't working together, no matter what else you do for the story, no matter how tight you're plotting, how quick you're pacing, how great your voicing, how wonderful your line level writing, it doesn't matter. None of that will matter if these three elements aren't working together and playing nicely together. So you really want to have a strong foundation. And I've already alluded to this, but I'm going to say it again because a lot of times writers will try to cram everything in the kitchen sink, throw it all there in together, thinking that it's all going to work. We're going to make it all work within a story. I would encourage you to think simply about these three things. Make sure that they are clear, make sure that they make sense together, that they work together, and that is how you will make sure that you can have a strong premise. If you try to cram in too many ideas, it becomes disjointed, your narrative will become confusing, and the reader will not want to engage at all. So I hope that these concepts will help you as you are developing your story idea. I would encourage you to take some time. Take some time. This can sometimes come quickly, but quite frankly, I've worked with writers before who have needed to spend some weeks on this. And so it might sound simple because as a framework, it actually is very simple, but in practice, it can be a little complicated. So take time with it. I would encourage you to, if you have a trusted critique partner, maybe you can get some feedback from them. This is the kind of work that book coaches do. You'll be hearing from a lot of book coaches this week. So if you happen to write middle grade and YA, you'll find a lot of help here in that way. And I hope you have fun with it, and I hope that you will find that it helps you to build a strong story premise so that you can create an awesome book for young readers, because that is what we are all here to do. So I thank you for joining me, and we will see you in the next one. Bye.